community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernández. The new school year is upon us, and parents are rushing about buying clothes, supplies, and just getting children ready for school with advice on good behavior. But many families have questions about schools and what they require for registration and other matters. Here to talk about some of that information and other resources, we have Jesse Ruiz, the Vice President of the Chicago Board of Education. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to start off by just talking about you and your background and how you came to be part of the Board of Education.
Sure. Well, I'm a native Chicagoan, spent my entire life here, other than 4 years in Champaign-Urbana for undergraduate. Grew up in the far south side in the Roseland community. My parents were Mexican immigrants, and they were strong believers in education, even though my dad, who was came here as a migrant farm worker in the 1940s, he unfortunately recently just passed away. So I remember his lessons well about wanting to have an opportunity for his children that he never had. He only got to go to the 3rd grade in Mexico, and then he had to help out since he was the eldest and work on the family farm, and worked in factories here all his life. And all his life was about making sure his kids had educational opportunities. I have 3 older sisters. We all graduated high school. A few of us went to college, and I went to law school, and that's what been my motivation to help. The only way that I can help and repay that is to help others, and so I strive to help others through my service on the Board of Education. Previously, I served on the State Board of Education, and hopefully it's through those efforts I can honor my father's life with all the things that I do on the school board. And so I'm always cognizant of that I am doing that, and always seek to do the best for our kids and give the opportunities to as many Chicago kids and Illinois kids as my dad gave to me.
Okay. Tell me about one of those lessons that your father gave you that you remember very clearly, maybe sitting at the kitchen table or in the backyard.
Sure. Now, he had one phrase he always said that, like, in his view of the world, there are only 2 ways to earn a living in this world. And you had to earn a living. You had to make your way and contribute to this world. And you either did it with your head or your back. And he would say, I didn't get the choice to choose. He's like, you're going to have a choice, and it's your life. He's like, but I will give you the options, and then it's your choice. He's like, I'm not going to live your life for you. I'm not going to provide for you all your life. I'm going to give you the tools you need, and hopefully you take advantage of them. So I took them to heart, and I did take advantage of them, and I chose to go to law school and be an attorney.
Wow. So now you choose to honor him through your work in education.
I try to. I hope I do. And my mom's still alive, still living in the Roseland community, and I still also remember she did graduate high school in Mexico, and is very proud to still have all her diplomas and her report cards, straight A student, always very proud of it, and said, you know, I did this, I expect nothing less. They both were always strong advocates of education, and that was the purpose of their life. That was the purpose of coming to this country, to make sure that we all had opportunities they didn't have necessarily. And she reinforced it with her deeds, too. She was a Girl Scout leader, Boy Scout leader, because my dad always worked at nights and he wasn't around. She did Little League. She did everything. And I distinctly remember laying down with her in her bedroom one Sunday afternoon when I was in 1st grade. And it seemed like what took like 3 hours to go through and sound out the words to a Curious George book, I think it was. And I was crying, and I thought it was hard, and she would put the effort in to make sure I learned how to read. And at the end of that 1st grade year, I won an award for being one of the best readers in the class, and I credit my mom's efforts for that. And so that's to me was the lesson in parenting of what we all have to do. So when I was tired coming home and my sons were in preschool, I remember my mom and thinking, like, I don't care how tired I am. I'm like, I've got to walk the talk and sit down and read with them every night.
Wow, so it's pretty amazing. I think many parents can relate to that. And one of the reasons why we're here is to help parents who might be have some confusion about the start of the school year. Where do they get information? Especially parents of younger children. Maybe they're looking to get them into kindergarten, and Latino parents too, or even non-Latino parents who whose first language may not be English.
Yeah, there's a lot of languages we teach in CPS schools or teach in, and so there are a lot of great communities, which is one of the strengths and great advantages of our city. But it also adds some complexities to having to communicate to all the diverse communities and in all the diverse languages. But education is universal, and so it's critical, and especially for kindergarten. You mentioned kindergarten. the wonderful thing this year is that the Mayor Emanuel, pushed very hard to make sure that we invested in full-day kindergarten. So now there is no half-day kindergarten any longer, because we know students who are in full-day kindergarten, particularly students who may have grown up in a household with a second language, benefit and, again, will become those early readers, will become early self-learners, will become very productive students. And so we want to give every student in Chicago that advantage. And so now, for the first year in Chicago ever, we'll have 7 hours of kindergarten. And so I hope every student, every parent and family, guardian, grandparent who's in charge of overseeing a child's life, if they're 5 by September 1st, that they seek out their neighborhood school and enroll them in kindergarten. We've worked in areas where there has been overcapacity to make sure we've provided extra capacity. The mayor fought hard to have an additional $15 million of investment to make sure that we could accommodate every child to have full-day kindergarten. So yes, we hopefully will have as many students as possible take advantage of this and be there on August 26th in their neighborhood school to take advantage of kindergarten, as well as all the other students and all the other grades as well.
But okay, just to be clear, and so our viewers understand, a child has to be 5?
You have to have reached the age of 5 by September 1st.
By September 1st in order to register.
Enroll, and they just go to their local school and enroll. They just have to prove residency, and it could be through a utility bill, it could be through a variety of documents, and the age of their child. It could be through a birth certificate, a passport, a baptismal certificate, a court document. There's a variety of documents. Illinois is a great state in that we recognize that some folks, particularly undocumented residents, may not have some of the traditional documents that schools had required, and so we passed a rule at the state board level. Prior, I was chairman of the state board for 7 years before joining the CPS board, and we made sure that rule was in place so that it shouldn't bar any child. And luckily, in our Supreme Court's wisdom 30 years ago, they said that no children should suffer, especially if they came here as an infant. If they're undocumented, they should be entitled to a public education, because the odds are they're going to remain here, and we want them to be well equipped to navigate our economy and contribute to our society. And in this day and age, that requires a good education.
Definitely, definitely. So it doesn't matter if they're not born in this country, and they whatever documents
the Supreme Court 1983 Supreme Court case of Plyler versus Doe establishes the right of all children to receive a public education in the United States, regardless of their immigration status.
Great. Now, along with that,
and interestingly, I can tell you,
Go ahead.
the law professor I learned that case from in law school was a young law professor named Barack Obama, back in 1994 at the University of Chicago Law School.
Really? Well, let me be clear on this. When, how did you learn about this?
He was teaching a course, and this is where I learned this case, was in the midst of that course that he was teaching. It was in his first or second class that he taught when he was teaching at the University of Chicago Law School.
Oh, wow.
So I was privileged to have a professor like Barack Obama, and also Elena Kagan, who's now on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow. Oh, it's great teachers, and obviously
great law school, great time to be at that law school. It was in the early 90s when you had folks like Elena Kagan and Barack Obama.
And great wisdom that you're now sharing with our viewers. Now, what are some other problems that parents of young children, but not just young children, face at the beginning of the school year, and what problems have they told you about, and what has the Chicago Board of Education done to help them along that path?
I mean, normally in any given year, there's just, especially students who they may not have been enrolled, they're entering kindergarten or they're entering first grade, or they may have just moved to the city, just where to go and what to do. And you just simply go to your neighborhood school. As you progress, in some schools, there are other schools that are magnet schools, and there are selective enrollment schools. It gets a little more complicated where you have to test into some of those schools. But if you're starting in the early grades, like kindergarten, first grade, preschool, there's no testing. You just show up to your neighborhood school and enroll. And so that's a simple part. This year, there's the added complexity where there's a number of schools that, unfortunately, due to insufficient enrollment, we had to close this past spring. And so now those students will attend new schools. Largely, those students should have been informed of what the welcoming school will be. That's usually within a 4 to 8 block radius of where they had been going to school. and we've established safe passage to those schools. There's routes that they should take and be aware of. And so those families hopefully have been informed, but there's also, we're not leaving anything to chance and making a full court press to make sure that we're working with community organizations, with local churches. You'll probably see a lot more in the press. We're talking here, and hopefully all your viewers will hear about these things. And they can always go to cps.edu or dial the main CPS number and ask for information on there. Folks are more than happy, and we will be making telephone calls. I mean, we leave no stone unturned, and want to make sure everybody has all the information and make sure that their child is in their school on Monday, August 26th, which is also something of note this year. We are starting the Monday before Labor Day. Traditionally, in Chicago, it was always the Tuesday after Labor Day, and we know that our children deserve and need every moment they can get in school, and so we're starting the school year earlier. We're going to have a longer school year. We have a full school day. Now we have full kindergarten in Chicago. We're trying to make great strides, and still in the midst of substantial challenges in terms of our finances and our funding, and the pension crisis in Illinois that puts a lot of stress on us in trying to balance our budget. But in the midst of all that, it's still trying to improve our school system. Okay.
Now, you touched on the question about these safe zones or safe routes.
Safe passage.
Safe passage.
Is what they're designated.
Do you have a grid available to?
They're still rolling some of those out in the next few weeks because they're taking a lot of community input, and they will be those maps. And they're now also going to be street signs that Streets and Sanitation has put up. So there's going to be clear marking of visible, I think, lime green signs, yellow signs that will mark the passage. And so that's been a lot of work with the Chicago Police Department, with community organizations, with parent input, so that we get all the best knowledge from folks who are in those communities to say, let's try to, steer around this street because of high traffic. Let's start to steer around this because maybe there's an alley there that's not so safe. And so or if there's abandoned buildings, Streets and Sanitation is trying to knock those things down, abandoned garages. Again, trying to make the ideal path and have a lot of extra workers. We've contracted with a lot of community organizations throughout the city to make sure that they can hire, and it's on their employees. And we contract with these organizations to hire extra folks. You'll see them wearing, again, high visibility vests, and they'll be out there, they'll have their cell phones. They've been trained on to be extra eyes and ears. They don't replace the police, but they'll be extra eyes and ears to ensure, and it really is a community, as we were discussing before we began the program, it's a community's obligation to make sure that children are safe and children are educated and are in school. And so this is a tangible and very explicit way of doing that, is contracting with certain members of the community to make sure they're there on the job. It's not just their obligation as a citizen, it's their duty as an employee of their organization to be there and ensure the safety of those kids.
So how many people will be manning those blocks, or how many people do you hope to have per block?
It'll but typically you'll see 1 or 2 people per block. In my neighborhood where I live near Wicker Park, Humboldt Park, and I was jogging earlier this summer around Roberto Clemente High School. I was jogging to Humboldt Park, and I must have passed a half dozen people from my path from Western to California. And so it was interesting to see them all there, and then all looking at me and making sure that I belong there, and being vigilant and just making me feel safer as a member of the community.
Wow, okay. Well, now we're switching gears a bit. I want to come back to the parents of young children and what they need. Now, if a family has moved to this country, or and their children have received some of their inoculations, but not all. What's required for children entering school? What inoculations, and what kind of documents does CPS accept?
Your typical physician in Illinois will know that, because a lot of these things are mandated by law. And so it's measles, polio, and there's the standard litany. I can't tell you them all, but the doctors will know that. They'll have forms, or they can get them from the school. And what's required is that students who are enrolling for the first time in Illinois, so kindergarten, preschool, but definitely first graders, 6th graders, and 9th graders within a year. So typically this summer before, now would be a good time if you haven't done it already. Make sure your child goes and gets a visit to the doctor, make sure they're in good health. We know good health is important not only for that child, but for their fellow classmates, that everybody's healthy and ready to learn. and not posing any risk to themselves or to anyone else, and so thus the law is in place to do that. But those forms are available. You bring a form, and those are due by October 15th. So there's some time. You don't have to have it by the first day of school, but by October 15th, if the students don't have that done, then they're not going to be allowed to return to school until that's completed. So we got a few months, but no time to waste. Make sure you ask and go to cps.edu. Those things are there. There's a form. Most physicians will have the form and know that there's a certain number of vaccinations for those specific age groups. It's roughly around the ages of 5, 10, and 15. If you don't know what grades they correspond to, it's roughly around those ages that students should be have their immunizations up to date and current, and make sure they also see a dentist. So make sure that amazingly, I saw a statistic once that number one reason for absenteeism in schools is dental problems.
Wow.
And so we want to make sure students are healthy in school every single day, and so it's also important to visit your dentist and make sure children's, particularly at the younger age, teeth are developing well, and they're on track to have good oral health as well. So
you also put out the word through local clinics, community clinics, doctors, hospitals.
That's right. There's a variety of back-to-school fairs, and there's not a one that I've ever seen that doesn't involve some health aspect to it. So the community organizations, public officials who run back-to-school fairs, the number of local health clinics have been wonderful about these things, that they're always cognizant of that we're not only giving you a haircut or maybe a backpack, which are important, you look nice and are prepared with all your supplies, but that physically you're also prepared as well to be in school.
Okay, and a lot of this information you said is available online.
cps.edu is our website.
Right. We're going to have that on the graphic. But when a parent goes to the website, what other information do they find?
There's a myriad of it. You could spend days on the CPS website, and I've searched around there for a while, and I've just scratched the surface. But you can find all the schools, you can find academic programs, you can find who to reach for various things at the central office. We have fewer employees at the central office because we've tried to cut back and be leaner and leaner each year, but there's still a lot of great folks, a lot of great professionals and educators there who are, whose job is to help every single family in Chicago make sure that their children are getting the best possible educational opportunities and getting everything they need to succeed and get a 21st century education.
Okay. Now, you said the website is full of information. You said we could spend days and days on there.
You could.
What about parents who have limited access to the internet? How do they go about getting information?
They should just go to their school. I mean, schools are staffed year-round. The teachers may not be there, but administrators are there, principals are usually there.
Okay.
And so just go to your neighborhood school and ask, and they should be willing to help you, whether or not you end up enrolling at that particular school, or they can direct you to whatever the other school you belong to based on your address, the enrollment, or the attendance area of that school, or other programs you may be eligible for if you have students in higher grades. So those professionals there and educators are there to help and assist everybody. Make sure that, again, I can't stress it enough, that every single child is in class, in their desk, on August 26th, which is a little bit earlier this year, so we have to keep reminding folks it's not after Labor Day, it's before Labor Day this year, and so it'll be a little extra effort to make sure we're all ready to go in only a few short weeks.
Right, because prior, I mean, in years prior, there's been a large, well, I'm thinking in Spanish here, a large amount of people that just miss school the first day, right?
Yeah, and it's also critical because the state gives us our funding based on one of the averages of our 3 highest average daily attendance days is what they call it. And so we either help ourselves or hurt ourselves by not having a record day on that first day. And so in years past, CPS, when Arnie was here, he would go out, and because he knew, and he was doing it, frankly, because it would help him manage his budget, because he would get more funding the more students he had that he could record as having full attendance on that first day. And the first day was typically one of the best days of the year. And so it's important that we drive up our number for that reason, and in turn you're helping bring more resources to the district and to your school, but also it's important to each student and each family that make sure that they start great habits from the very beginning.
It just sets the tone.
It sets the tone for the entire year, and frankly for an academic career of that student, that they know that it's important to be on time, it's important to be where you're supposed to be on a given date and time, it's important to be prepared, and it just sets a tone of leading a healthy life and being a productive citizen and an adult later on. and becoming self-managing. It's amazing when you see kids that even in first, second grade can begin to manage themselves, manage their routine, get themselves ready. Take some parental help to do that, some adult help to do that, and so we owe it to them that they can get there and be productive learners, so that everybody's reading by grade level in third grade, which is critical, particularly for English language learners, that we have everybody reading by. So there's not a lot of time. So those preschool, kindergarten, first, second grade years are critical.
Definitely. And you talked about English language learners. What if a family goes to their neighborhood school and they don't find the information available in their language? It may be they need information in Chinese or Polish or a myriad of other languages.
All languages that you can find. Some of that is on the website.
Okay.
But they can direct folks to the website information where they can get that information. There's a lot of great community organizations.
So they would go to they would go to the school, and
exactly.
And at the school, if they didn't have that information in their language, they would direct them to an organization or to the website.
Or a staff person at CPS that can help them in their preferred first language, and make sure that language should never be a barrier for making sure you get the education for your child that they deserve, and that your child gets the education. If the child also needs bilingual education services, then they can be assessed, and they should be assessed, and make sure that they're getting those services as well, so they can transition to having, being in a full English classroom at some point in the near future.
Okay. Now, switching gears a bit, what would you recommend for families to do during these final weeks of summer as they're getting ready to send their children to school? What practical things, what advice would you give to families to think about?
I'm smiling because I have my own grammar school kids at home, and the bedtime has slipped a little bit in the summertime, so one of the things that we're starting to do already is start adjusting that back to the normal school year bedtime, because kids need time just like adults need time to kind of acclimate to an earlier wake up time, get ready, get themselves ready, get into that routine. Humans are creatures of habit, and yet we can form really good ones or start forming really bad ones very quickly. And so getting those routines down so that the child is not half asleep at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, where they're going to now need to get up, because start times do vary. August 26th is the start date for every school in Chicago from now on. We're on one calendar, but the start times do vary. And so some schools start as early as 7:30 in the morning, which means maybe there's a child getting up at 6 a.m.
Wow.
And probably parents that have to get up at 5:30 a.m. to ensure that child's there on time. And so we probably need to start getting to bed a little earlier, making sure, in my household, leaving your clothes out the night before, leaving your backpack ready, leaving your lunch ready, just having all those things ready, all the supplies. Some schools and some classes may have a supply list. Ask about that. The doctor visits, the dental visits. Enjoy the rest of the remaining few weeks of summer. Spend some time with your family, and when we get more time, when students aren't in school, but also start preparing and slowly, so it's not a huge adjustment, on the last day, because it takes some time to start acclimating your body to getting up early and going to bed earlier, especially when it's still bright out like now in the summertime.
Now, you mentioned the supply list. What about parents who may have a hard time paying for that supply list or paying for uniforms? Who can they turn to in CPS or community organizations to get some help with that?
You mentioned both. There are wonderful community organizations who help out in this regard. There are public officials who have a lot of back-to-school fairs where they provide school supplies to students. CPS runs a program that we've been helping fund school supply drives for schools and students. My wife's law firm, I know, adopted a school, Canoon Elementary School. Her law firm raises a significant amount of funding to provide every single student with a backpack with all the supplies they need. So there are a lot of great organizations that help, but the focal point is typically the school, and find out first what you need, what's required, what's provided, and then once you figure out what you need, figure out then how to get it and who can help you get it if you're not able to afford all the supplies right now. But in lower grades, it's fairly basic. It gets a little more complicated in high school, where you might need calculators and things. But we try hard to make sure that every family has and every student has what they need on day one. Some schools have uniforms. Some are moving toward that, and help simplify families' lives, where you don't have to decide every morning what somebody's going to wear. It's decided for you. Everybody looks the same. helps in terms of knowing who attends a certain school when everybody's walking to school and they all look the same and or dress the same, and so all those things, you just go to your school and they should help you navigate those challenges, which again it can be difficult for a lot of families running around. There's always lots to do, but in these final few weeks, these are some of the things that have to go on the to-do list that we have to get done, and we have to ensure that our students are ready to go on August 25th to be at their school on August 26th. And
what's required, like if somebody says, "Oh, I can't afford this," but do they have to have a proof of income, or is
no,
it just
typically not. Typically not. Most programs, it's an honor system that most folks, and some of it, we just want to provide it to all students, regardless of need level, and so we try to provide that for most students. I mean, many of the students in CPS are on free and reduced lunch, so we know that their families don't have a lot of extra resources, so I try to be as helpful as possible. And there's a lot of great organizations, a lot of great companies who provide a lot of resources for our students. So we're in a good city in that regard, where there's a lot of nonprofits, a lot of foundations that help a lot of our students and help the school system as well.
Okay. Just a couple more questions. We're getting low on time here. If anybody would ever like to meet you, or anybody in the school board,
sure.
Is that possible, or how would
Very
that
much
work?
so. Every single month we have office hours, and we try to rotate it. There are 7 of us on the school board, and in addition to our monthly meetings, where you see them happening there at 125 South Clark, typically the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and there's 2 hours of public participation. I understand that's not a lot of time for a city like Chicago, school district the size of Chicago, but try to be efficient and allocate people 2 minutes per speaker to come and address but we also have office hours, which is, again, one-on-one. We could be sitting like we are sitting right now and come and spend 15-20 minutes talking about a particular concern, an idea, a thought that you have. It could be personally about your child, or it could be, I've had senior citizens come in who don't have children in the system, who are long out of school themselves, but just have general concerns, and I welcome talking to folks like that, because we need more and more folks to be concerned about every single child, whether you have a child in the school district or not, and whether you live in Chicago or not. If you're concerned about our kids, I want to talk to you and figure out how you can help improve our school system for all our kids, because they're all our kids, and frankly, it's a volunteer effort to be on the school board, but I think it's very important for me, and it's very critical to my well-being as a citizen of Chicago, that everybody's got to be prepared to contribute, and the only way you can be prepared in this day and age is to get a high-quality education. And so it's in my best interest. And as I age and I think about the next generation who's going to be making policy decisions and hopefully caring for my well-being, my dad lived to 96, and so I've probably got some longevity in me, and so I jokingly say it, but I'm serious, that I realize my future is in the hands of those students who are at CPS today, and so I better make sure that they're well equipped.
Okay, great. Well, we're pretty much out of time. Just a very brief phrase. What's your hope for this new school year?
That every student that can be enrolled and should be enrolled is enrolled and is in class on August 26th, that we start this new longer school year and full school day and full kindergarten, taking full advantage of the opportunities that CPS has to offer, and that every citizen in Chicago comes together to work to improve our school system.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Community Forum is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Community Forum for local issues and concerns every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernández. Thank you for joining us.